We are here today because every man and woman in this room knows and understands morning is coming. Morning is coming.
What America needs is not just another politician or more promises. What America really needs is a revival.
It isn't the government or some ne'er-do-well politician that gives us our rights. It's the Creator who gives us our rights.
It's easy to see where we are going if you know what the fight is. And that's why it's important, ladies and gentlemen, to elect leaders and to have leaders within our movement, which we, frankly, do not have many of.
Sights and sounds of the Value Voters Summit here in Washington. We begin there in the Friday Lightning Round. Charles.
Look, I think the way to summarize what's going on is Democrats on their side have decided to wage the so-called war on women as a way to summarize their cultural war. And for Republicans, it's essentially accusing the Democrats, as they should, and they ought to, of waging a war on religion. All of these related issues, Sibelius versus Little Sisters of the Poor, that's the major lawsuit, forcing nuns into giving contraceptive coverage. I think they ought to highlight that. And not to say the conservatives are imposing religion. All they're asking for is the tolerance of others for religious practice. I think that could be a winning issue.
At the same time, there's a new Pew Research poll just out of the past couple of weeks about religion in American life, and there you see the numbers. Completely upside down as far as influence, losing or gaining.
And what was interesting about this poll, Bret, is that people, as they're fearing that that religion is losing influence, there's a growing support to see more churches and faith-based groups in politics, which is an interesting trend. The other thing that you saw in that poll was that people are increasingly thinking this president is unfriendly to religion. There's sort of a steady drive towards that.
David.
Well, I think that if you look at the conservative movement, the change for them is in the 80s, 90s, and the first half of the 2000s, they were with the culture war. And I think since the second half of the 2000s, the culture war has gone against them. And what they have to figure out how to do, and Charles makes a great point here, is talk to voters at large in a way that can attract support. You want to focus on religious freedom. You want to focus on a culture of life, old Republican language for being pro-life on the issue of abortion. And I think they have to dial down their public opposition, that the sort of vitriol that they approach the same-sex marriage issue with. They can continue to oppose it, but they have to be more welcoming, I think, to people who support same-sex marriage.
All right, quickly down the row on Kansas, the Senate race there. Pat Roberts, the incumbent, facing a very formidable challenge in Greg Orman, the independent, and we talked a little bit about it. There's this debate of where he would caucus, Greg Orman. I don't think there's really a debate, really.
Well, look, I think he might be being a little too cute by half here. If you go to his campaign website, he says if one party is firmly, quote-unquote, in control of the Senate, I will caucus with them. And if he said if it's, unclear, then who knows what I'll do. And that,
it's up for grabs.
That'll only go so far because eventually voters are going to think that you're trying to play games with them. And that doesn't hurt the sort of independent authenticity. I'm not a politician like the other guy. I think he's got to watch that.
Yeah.
Well, he's got Democratic roots. He's filed as a Democrat. He's given monies to Democrats. There's an interesting little play this week where the Tea Party candidate who ran against Pat Roberts suggested endorsing him possibly, or that was the news account.
That meeting fell off.
Then the meeting fell off and it didn't happen, and, who knows. But it's definitely the race to watch.
Winners and losers.
My winner is Major Miriam Al-Mansouri. She was the pilot leading the UAE contingent over Syria, which of course is great PR in the West, a little bit less great in Arabia, where there's been some grumbling of conservatives women ought not to be piloting aircraft, but not to the point where the UAE ambassador had to deny that the family is opposed to her. The loser of the week is Israel. It lost twice in one speech by the president of the UN. Number one, he singled it out as the cause of the lack of progress on peace, which is astonishing after the Gaza war. And secondly, he gave the weakest statement ever on Iran, essentially saying Iran will decide whether it wants to go nuclear or not. I kind of hope it does, which is, if you're an Israeli, that means you don't sleep well at night.
Well, I loved Charles's winner. That was a good one. My winner would be America's big banks, with the resignation of Attorney General Eric Holder. depending on the successor, of course. But Holder is considered among banks as sort of a shakedown artist. He's gone after them for tens of billions of dollars. They feel like they were just basically a gun put to their head, and they had to pay this just to keep peace with shareholders and consumers and move on. My loser of the week would be John Boehner, because again, I think this was a time when Congress should be stepping up to the plate and should have a voice in military action in the Middle East.
I'm going to play a little small ball here compared to my colleagues, but winner, Cory Gardner, who's running for Senate out in Colorado. The polls are looking pretty good for him, especially against a strong candidate like Mark Udall. And he came out with a great ad going after Udall for the family business, his cousins, his late father being in politics. Very effective stuff. My loser, for people who think Congress is the most hapless organization in Washington, I present to you the Washington Redskins. Lost twice in a week, looked worse Thursday than they did Sunday, and those guys just can't do anything right.
So sad.